So the biggest problem I see with online atheism is, and this is everywhere, is when they go on and they argue with the Bible, which means they want a competition between what they know about the Bible and what the religious person does. So they're basically using these texts and these myth stories against the people they're trying to debunk. I've never understood why you would spend 5 minutes of your time reading it. So, for example, when I taught students or argued with students or a regular person, even some wayward professors, about on this topic, they would say, they would quote something or ask me something about the New Testament, the Old Testament, or the Middle Testament, or I don't know how many testicles they have, but I would simply say, I didn't read any of it. Nothing. Never opened it. Don't care. Not going to. And so in some sense, what this does currently in, this little religion debate language game is disqualify me from, I don't know, having my own perspective. So what the atheists do online, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them spend a lot of time doing it, is they parse through these myth stories and these different testicles. And they come up with these, I don't know, responses. Look how many times that condones slavery. Look how many times it says something bad about women, whatever. I don't know, because I don't read it. That's the point. So this is what I want to say. There's a number of problems here. But the first one is that the way they look at that book and the way you do are completely different. And so when you're trying to debate with them, you're not really debating. All you're doing is debating with someone who's already a non-believer. So you're not really debating because they agree with you. But you're looking at that book as a literal book. You're looking at it as, people between 2,000 years ago and 300 years ago rewriting some of these stories, and even older, I guess, for the older testicle. But what you're doing is arguing based on the fact that it's a literal book, and they're arguing very differently, that it's some divinely inspired ESP. I don't know. And this is what I talk about a lot with dismissive philosophy, starting with the Earl of Shaftesbury, and that is that there's a lot of stuff you need to dismiss, that you need to hold in contempt of court, because it's so irrelevant and so distracting to the actual process of figuring out how people think and how they should think, that it just becomes a huge problem for you. We'll constantly talk about how much more they know about the book than the theist. And then they'll say, or the premise will be, because the theist knows less than I do, they should change their mind. And I don't think out of 20 million times that's happened, it's ever succeeded. I don't think. And I'm not saying just because of that number and just because of how hard-headed people are. I'm saying that you're arguing about a book that you look at differently, but so differently that there's no conversation about the content. All you can do is dismiss it as a cult guide myth book and ignore it, and then talk about something else. Talk about what they really do, talk about what they really believe, talk about what belief even means, which is why philosophy is more important than, I don't know what you would call it, religious studies, or anything above philosophy and science that would take into account the book, the idea, the debate, academically or not academically. So again, one of the biggest problems and things atheists need to be aware of is just how superficial and pointless and lacking in priority any study of the Bible would be in this discussion. It would be like me going into a and wanting to say this cult is bad when we all know they're looking for magic diapers and plastic pans buried in the sky, and saying I'm not equipped to tell you your cult is bad until I read your 30 years, 10,000 page manifesto, so that I can quote back to you the sophistry that has no content anyway, because it's about nothing. So another point based on that I want to bring up, this is the last point we'll end this video, and it is these texts, what little I know of them, I know a lot about the structure of the ideas, and what these texts and these ideas are designed to do is to be sophistic. And what that means is they're designed to protect themselves from outside opinion. The content itself is often self-contradictory, and it's not because they're bad writers, it's because they're doing it on purpose, and it has evolved in this way to become self-protective, which means if I can make this idea obscurant or esoteric is a good word, or just outright self-contradictory and confusing, then it's harder for people to make the case against me. And it's not that they can't, it's that when they do, the tools are there for them to sophistrize, which means to say something in response that just makes it more confusing so no one gets anywhere. It's not about them convincing you. It's about them shutting that particular Reformation idea or that critique or that complete denial of anything that has to do with the the basic substructure of the religious quote unquote philosophy. It's to protect that. And so that's what you're doing, and you're going into their language game using their idea, their guidebook in order to do it. So stop reading it. That's what I'm saying. That's something you should be aware of as a non-believer, and as a theist, you should understand that that's what you're doing, and there's probably something more constructive.